While power companies in Indiana are retiring many of their coal-fired plants in response to new EPA regulations, many still remain online. And as Jimmy Jenkins reports, the way they dispose of their harmful byproducts is unregulated and can result in contamination of the state's water resources.
In the neighborhood of East Mount Carmel, residents like to live a simple country life. They fish in the nearby Wabash River, they get around on their dirt bikes and ATVs, and they go to church. But several years ago, the quality of life here was threatened. East Mount Carmel is located just across the street from the third largest coal-fired power plant in the world. Duke Energy says its Gibson generating station burns approximately 8 million tons of coal annually, producing 18 million megawatts of power each year. There are many byproducts from the process, but coal ash or fly ash has the most potential for contamination.
This is generated in what we call a pulverized coal burner, which takes very small particles of coal, burns them at high temperature, typically over 1100 degrees Celsius.
Duke stores more coal ash at the Gibson plant than at any other place in the state, almost 17 million tons. And that doesn't include other ash stored on site, including ash in the landfills and structural fills. One of the most common ways to deal with coal ash is simply to dig a large pit and store it on site at the plant. Sometimes water is added to the ash so it can be moved around through pipes and stored in ponds. There are 74 of these ponds across 17 locations in Indiana. That's more than any other state in the country. And they can dwarf the size of other man-made reservoirs. But unlike typical landfills, they're almost entirely unregulated. They don't have to be lined like municipal solid waste landfills, so the ash can and does leach into the surrounding area and water table. In most cases, power plant owners are supposed to get a permit from the Department of Natural Resources if they want to build a coal ash pond on their property. But the reality is that rarely happens.
Some of the dams in the state and the ash ponds have gone through our permit process. I would say the majority of them have not. And some are inspected that we had been aware of through going through the permit process. There are likely others out there that should have gone through the process but didn't.
Why is that?
You'd have to ask the owners that. Why they would do that, I don't know.
Smith says a recent survey from the EPA showed several power companies had built coal ash ponds without seeking a permit.
There were many on that list that were ones that were not in our inspection program. They had never gone through our permit process.
Smith says the DNR doesn't strictly enforce the permit process for coal ash ponds because, unlike some levees and dams, most coal ash ponds don't pose a high risk of loss of life if they were to breach.
Clearly, we have to prioritize. Just like policemen on a road that have the need to use discretion. Not every single person that speeds winds up getting pulled over by a police car.
The DNR has not taken any enforcement action against the owners of the plants that are not in compliance. If a coal ash pond fails, the results can be disastrous. In February, a massive breach at a Duke Energy plant in North Carolina dumped 39,000 tons of coal ash into the Dan River, covering the river bottom for more than 70 miles downstream. While no one was killed, environmentalists say the ecological disaster that resulted is immeasurable.
After the North Carolina incident, we take that very seriously, and we immediately brought in an outside engineering firm to do an inspection.
Duke operates a plant in Indiana under similarly dangerous conditions. Just north of Terre Haute is the Duke Wabash River Station where, like in North Carolina, a large storm water line runs underneath coal ash ponds and empties into the Wabash River.
Can this happen? Yes, it has happened, and it's likely to happen again unless we're making sure that we're preventing, putting in place things to prevent and make sure that all of these ponds are constructed in a safe way.
As you just heard, there have been several coal ash spills in Indiana. Next week, in the second of this two-part series, Jimmy Jenkins will revisit the residents of East Mount Carmel, Indiana, to find out how coal ash ruined their water supply. We'll also look at what some power companies are doing to make coal ash storage safer and explain a beneficial reuse industry that recycles coal ash to keep it out of landfills.